everything you need to know about Saturday Night Live with John Schneider and James Stevens.
Welcome, everybody, to the first installment of everything you need to know about Saturday Night Live. My name is John Schneider from the Saturday Night Network.
And I'm James Stevens, and we're going to explore season by season all the cast members, sketches, characters, and backstage stories that have made this show a television institution.
So welcome to everything you need to know about Season 1 of Saturday Night Live. Let's start by taking you all the way back to 1974. At the time, The Tonight Show starring the legendary Johnny Carson would air reruns on Saturday nights on NBC. In order to take an additional weekday off, Carson requested to move those reruns to weekdays. NBC granted Carson's wish, but needed to fill in the 11:30 p.m. slot on Saturdays with a new program.
Then president of NBC, Herb Schlosser, hired Dick Ebersol, who had a background in sports and became an executive of late-night TV on the network the year prior, to oversee this new project. Ebersol chose a young Canadian writer-producer, Lorne Michaels, to run the show. Michaels was 31 at the time and had developed the Hart and Lorne Terrific Hour, a Canadian variety show with his comedy partner Hart Pomerantz. Michaels also worked on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In in the late 1960s and various television specials for Phyllis Diller, Lily Tomlin, and Flip Wilson.
Michaels and Ebersol worked on a rough outline of what the show would look like. It would be a hip comedy variety program for baby boomers that dared to stay up late. It would have that variety show feel with a different host every week, live musical acts, guest performers, and an ensemble cast to perform sketches. Instead of hiring well-known talent to be in the cast, the decision was made to hire young performers and writers from the uprising comedy scene. The original cast consisted of 9 players. The first 4 came from various National Lampoon projects, including 35-year-old Michael O'Donoghue from New York City, who became the first head writer, 32-year-old Chevy Chase from New York City, 29-year-old Gilda Radner from Detroit, 26-year-old John Belushi from Chicago. They were joined by Dan Aykroyd, 23 years old from Ottawa, Ontario, who was a member of the Second City in Toronto and Chicago, Lorraine Newman, 23 years old from Los Angeles, who was a founding member of the Groundlings, Jane Curtin, a 28-year-old actress from Cambridge, Massachusetts, Garrett Morris, a 38-year-old playwright from New Orleans, and George Coe, a 46-year-old character actor from Queens, New York.
This eclectic group of performers would be joined by an incredible writing team consisting of Ann Beatts, who worked with and was romantically involved with O'Donoghue at the National Lampoon, Marilyn Suzanne Miller, who had recently won an Emmy for her work on a Lily Tomlin special, Rosie Schuster, daughter of comedian Frank Schuster, who worked with Lorne as a writer on Canadian TV before the two became married, Al Franken and Tom Davis, a young comedy duo from LA who took a joint salary to come onto the show and learn from some of the greats. Tom Schiller, a young writer and film producer who would go on to produce many short films for the show. Alan Zweibel, a writer for stand-up comics in the Borscht Belt. And Herb Sargent, a veteran TV writer and producer who would actually coin the term,
"I'm not ready for primetime players."
NBC's Saturday Night premiered on October 11th, 1975. The name Saturday Night Live was already taken by a new variety show hosted by Howard Cosell, which premiered a month prior on ABC. The first episode, hosted by George Carlin, had a variety show feel to it. Carlin performed 4 monologues and did not appear in any sketches. Janis Ian and Billy Preston each performed 2 songs. Andy Kaufman and Valerie Bromfield performed stand-up. And a short film by Albert Brooks was shown.
This says that I'm in charge of casting.
Jim Henson's Muppets even had their own recurring sketch, The Land of Gorch, which would last for only 1 season.
For that, I paid 2 chickens.
There were some moments from the premiere broadcast that became ingrained in SNL history. The first cold open, Wolverines, features John Belushi and Michael O'Donoghue, with Chevy Chase giving us the now famous opening line.
Live
Next, Lorne Michaels and Herb Sargent created Weekend Update, a satirical news program in which they would make fun of the top stories of the week. The faux newscast was similar to a segment Lorne did on the Hart and Lorne Terrific Hour and planned to save that segment for himself. Ultimately, it went to Chevy instead. Despite the many changes to the cast, and even the occasional title changes, Weekend Update would remain a focal point of the show for years to come. Finally, the first episode introduces our first recurring character, the Bees. The Bees became synonymous with the original cast because after the premiere episode, NBC asked Lorne to cut the Bees out of future shows. As a sign of the show's rebellious nature, the cast continued to bring the Bees back episode after episode.
Do you think we like this?
George Coe, who was the oldest cast member of the bunch, was not recognized as a main cast member after the first episode, though he would remain an extra throughout the season. Head writer Michael O'Donoghue, whose unique brand of humor would help establish the dangerous sensibilities of the show, was credited as a cast member through the fourth episode, though he would continue to make additional appearances throughout the next couple of years and remained the head writer. The second episode, hosted by Paul Simon, consisted almost entirely of musical performances. With most of the cast appearing only once, dressed as the Bees, makes this episode one of the most unique broadcasts in the show's history.
I'm really sorry, the Bees number is cut.
This episode feels more like a music special than a comedy show, though it does deliver Chevy's first of many staged falls. While the third episode, hosted by Rob Reiner, featured no credited musical guest, it does feature John Belushi's dead-on impression of Joe Cocker performing With a Little Help from My Friends.
What would you do if I had to?
The Rob Reiner episode also offers a guest appearance by future Season 6 cast member Denny Dillon, performing a routine with her comedy partner Mark Hampton.
Candice Bergen becomes the first female host in the fourth episode. It also marked some really important landmarks for the show.
We think it's going to be a very exciting show.
First, the debut of Chevy Chase's Gerald Ford impression began SNL's venture into politics. This impression of Ford by Chevy helped change the perception of Ford nationwide and helped establish Chevy as the star of the show. We also saw the debut of Landshark, a notable SNL sketch, as well as the first time Chevy opens Weekend Update with,
"Good evening, I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not."
We finish episode 4 with the cast joining the host on stage for the goodnights, a tradition that continues to this day. Dick Ebersol and Lorne Michaels would note that this was the first episode that truly felt like SNL, a show with sketch sensibility with the inclusion of musical performances. Comedian Robert Klein, whose episode featured the debut of Gilda Radner's Emily Latella character, and Lily Tomlin, would host the remaining 2 shows in November.
We're excited tonight to present this pageant to you.
December started out strong with one of the most important episodes in SNL history, the Richard Pryor hosted episode with musical guest Gil Scott-Heron. This episode was largely written by Pryor and his writing partner Paul Mooney, which led to the legendary word association sketch.
Dead hunky.
It also marked the debut of John Belushi's samurai character. Candice Bergen then became the first person to return and host for a second time when she hosted the very first Christmas show in 1975.
No problem.
By the start of the new year, the show started to really feel like it was hitting its stride. 1976 started out strong with 2 legendary hosts, Elliott Gould and Buck Henry, making their hosting debuts. Buck Henry's episode would mark the first time a host appeared on Weekend Update.
For Pete's sake!
And would also mark the appearance of Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi as Bees singing King Bee, backed by Howard Shore and his All Bee Band. This, of course, is a precursor to what we would know as the Blues Brothers.
Well, I'm a king bee, baby, pushing around your hide.
We would then get our first duo-hosted show with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, also the first British hosts in SNL history, followed by talk show host Dick Cavett. February would see Peter Boyle, Desi Arnaz, and Jill Clayburgh host. Clayburgh's show would premiere the first home movie in SNL history, The Mr. Bill Show, by filmmaker Walter Williams. Actor Anthony Perkins would then host in March.
The show reached new heights when White House Press Secretary Ron Nessen would host the first show in April, as it featured a pre-recorded President Gerald Ford saying,
"Live from New York, it's Saturday night."
It would also contain the famous Super Bass-O-Matic sketch and a guest appearance by future cast member Billy Crystal, who had been cut from the premiere episode. Raquel Welch would host the following week, marking the debut of Gilda Radner's Barbara Walters, or Baba Wawa, impression.
When does your contract with ABC go into effect?
As soon as I learn to pronounce Harry Wiesener.
It also featured an appearance from producer Lorne Michaels offering the Beatles $3,000 to be on the show.
You want to give Ringo less? That's up to you.
May's run of shows would start with Madeline Kahn, followed by actress Diane Cannon the next week. Buck Henry and Elliott Gould would return to the show to host the final 2 May episodes in what was thought to be the end of the season. Gould's second show would include the legendary Last Voyage of the Starship Enterprise sketch.
Due to the low Nielsen ratings, we at NBC have decided to, unfortunately, cancel Star Trek.
Fired my command.
Finally, for the only time in the show's history, persuaded by NBC in light of the show scoring a number of Emmys, SNL would extend its season run into the summer with 2 infamous episodes in July of 1976. Louise Lasser hosted the first show, in which she allegedly was very anxious backstage and locked herself in her dressing room before the live show. Chris Christopherson would host the finale, all the while reportedly drunk during dress rehearsal. In the end, Christopherson made it through the show, closing the book on the first and longest season of Saturday Night Live.
Overall, the journey of Saturday Night Live Season 1 is fascinating to watch.
Our top story tonight.
To see the show develop into the institution it is today is very fulfilling. Chevy quickly became the show's first breakout star in Season 1, but the contributions of John, Dan, Gilda, Lorraine, Jane, and Garrett became apparent as the audience became more familiar with them, and ultimately the reason fans of the show would tune in. We will dive much more into this in our second installment of everything you need to know about Saturday Night Live. If you've enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel below, and follow us on social media to see posts on all of the sketches you need to watch from Season 1 of SNL.
Saturday Night Live Season 1 is available now on Peacock. For all of us here at the Saturday Night Network, I'm James Stevens.
And I'm John Schneider. Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.